if I'm leaning back and sitting like this and having a non-smiling attitude throughout the meeting, that's certainly going to be read differently than if I'm sitting like this, right? And having an open facial expression and using gestures and leaning back and forth and doing stuff.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm Boris, the founder of the company and your host for this episode. And today we have an author of 24 books on negotiations. 24. He's also recognized by institutions like the Financial Times as one of the leading business minds in the world and works for companies like Microsoft, Danske Bank, Rolls-Royce, Maersk, Johnson & Johnson's, and many, many more. I can continue speaking about his achievements for at least the next 30 minutes. I just think that that's not why you are listening to the podcast. So let's welcome our next guest to the podcast, Keld Jensen. Keld, welcome to the podcast. Tell us, what did I miss to say about you that our audience should know about?
Oh, we don't want to bore your audience. I think you said the most important thing. That's the book public, the amount of books that I've created, which is obviously a lot of work, but exciting as well, because, I feel that you learn more writing a book than what your reader is actually getting from it. So to me, it's been a trip writing books on the topic of negotiation with connected behavioral economics and trust and communication as well. So besides that, I am Danish American national, dual citizen, live in the US. Before the pandemic, traveling globally, doing a lot of keynote speaking. Now I'm doing a lot of online speaking.
Obviously.
I'm suffering from what everybody knows is called Zoom fatigue. I am an associate professor at a university here in the US and at 2 universities in Europe. And as you pointed out, I'm working with a bunch of governments and organizations globally on how they can improve their negotiations. So that's really me. 2 kids, wife, and it's 2 boys. So it's busy at home.
Wow. Back on the books though, 24. The number of Kobe Bryant, my favorite basketball player, by the way. 24 books. How on earth do you write 24 books? Wow.
I actually don't know. I've got that question from people saying, how do you do it? Well, before the pandemic, I was traveling a lot, perhaps too much. And as you know, when you're traveling, you've been traveling a lot, Boris, as well, is that you are sitting at airports and on airplanes. And especially when you're doing transatlantic flights or going to Asia, it's a lot of wait time. So I'm actually one of those that hated the introduction of Wi-Fi on airplanes, because suddenly I feel now I'm connected to the world. Because before that, when I'm sitting on an airplane, it was just quiet. And you would know that you knew that your phone would not be ringing and you wouldn't receive an email. And so that actually gave me a lot of room to think and write. So I think a lot of the writing actually came through traveling. That's one way. And then obviously I just feel that we can interact, we can communicate, we can negotiate, we can collaborate so much better. So it's a mission for me really to try and change the mindset of how we communicate, collaborate, and negotiate. So it's really just my feelings and studies and surveys that is coming out in the books. So it's been fairly easy.
Yeah, I can imagine how much flights you have taken in order to write books. But yeah.
Too many.
Yeah, I thought that I was flying a lot, but no, not even close. Not even close. I am still about to write a book, but yeah, I don't have 24. Anyway, let's talk about your expertise because it's so interesting. I think somewhere I recently heard that negotiations is one of those skills that is in the top 5, maybe, of the most desired skills. Yep. Is that correct? Like top 5?
Yep.
We, the people that are listening to this podcast, are all coming here, obviously, because they are expecting something related to presentations and presenting. Mm-hmm. What are for sure, there should be some commonalities between negotiations and presenting. What are those?
Well, a lot. Now, first and foremost, negotiation is something that is truly important for all of us. I mean, a lot of people who are saying, well, negotiation, isn't that only something that happens with business people in a conference room and people in politics? And I say, yes, them too, but all of us are negotiating all the time. We're negotiating with our colleagues, we're negotiating with our employees, we're negotiating with our clients, we're negotiating with our kids, we're negotiating with authorities. We're basically negotiating all the time. So up to 80% of what we identify as communication is really a kind of a negotiation where one person person is trying to persuade another one. So it's very important to all of us. There's a lot of similarities between negotiation and presentation skills, because a really good negotiator understands how to present himself or herself as well. And one of the angles I find truly important in negotiation is trust. I mean, if you are not able to create trust, you're not going to be really successful as a negotiator. And trust has actually got a financial impact as well, because if you're able to generate a high level of trust, your transaction cost will go down and your profit will go up. But on the other hand, if your trust is low, transaction cost will be high and your profit will go down. So we can actually capitalize trust. That's why we call it trust currency, because it's just like a currency like dollars or euros or whatever. It's something that you can convert into a financial success. And one of the many ways that you generate trust is obviously how you communicate. It's not how you negotiate, but how you communicate and how you present yourself. So presentation skills is really essential for a lot of negotiators. And what is really important, Boris, is that a lot of negotiators actually don't understand that or embrace the concept or the importance of being able to present and communicate efficiently. So they're very focused on the content and the core of the whole topic, but they can't embrace the whole idea on how to negotiate. So there's a lot of similarities between the two areas.
Yeah, trust is obviously in like fundamental. Like hearing you saying it sounds like one of those fundamental things that you have to master and understand, that otherwise nothing will work, right? Yeah. If people don't trust you, it doesn't really matter what you're saying. Right?
No, absolutely. And that goes back to being a presenter. Obviously, I'm a keynote speaker and delivering a lot of keynotes. And trust is essential there as well, isn't it? I mean, and I believe so even in the future, we'll see that professional keynoters, professional speakers, them being themselves and being genuine and honest and transparent and creating trust is even more important than how they deliver the things, because there's so many speakers out there. There's so many great speakers as well. So how do you make a difference from the other ones? Well, obviously it's down to whether people like you and trust you.
How do you build trust in the context of a presentation? How do you build trust? Because I'm asking, because when we, for example, talk about this during our trainings, people say, when I ask them, hey, what are the things, what are the signs a presenter can give you that more or less tell you, hey, I feel like I think that this person is trustworthy. Yeah. And if you hear their answers, you hear his or her body language, the way they're dressed, the way they respond to questions. There's so many things. Like, what is your expert level take on this?
Well, everything you just said is true as well. But I think there's one thing that's even more important, and that is just being yourself, being a human being. Admit your flaws, share a little bit about yourself, and perhaps even sometimes verbalize trust. Talk about it. If I should get into negotiation, how we often advise our clients to open up negotiations is through communication, obviously, and how they present themselves. But what we're actually often doing is that we are verbalizing trust, saying it's important that we establish trust. It's even important that if we're losing trust, that we talk about it. So as a presenter, I think one of the things that you can do purposely or plan is actually being aware of being genuine, being yourself, share a little bit about yourself, as I just said, and perhaps even verbalize that trust is important to you. Now, you can't fake trust, obviously, because that will be perceived as faking it, but try and just be yourself. I mean, that's really important when you are a keynote speaker, especially in the future. As I said, I have no doubt that in the future, after this pandemic, we got a new world order on how we perceive speakers, both because we're going to talk about, is it going to be an online session? Is it going to be a live session? And I think we're just a little bit tired of the BS, if you know what I mean. All the speakers out there that are really great actors and just delivering something, but perhaps don't have content or don't have an honest content. So be yourself, be honest, be transparent, be honest about your flaws as well. And I really believe that way you connect to your audience and being perceived more trustworthy.
Do you feel like, by the way, because we are all virtual now, at least while we are recording this, do you feel like it's harder for the person who is the business professional or the professional speaker or the keynote speaker, as you said? Do you feel like for them, they now have a harder time building trust with their virtual audiences? Is it harder for them?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. It is harder to generate trust virtually than it is live. You probably know that yourself, Boris, that, when you're speaking, speaking like this, and you have a virtual crowd of, let's say, 500 people, you don't have that connection. You don't feel them. You don't get the energy in the room. You don't get any kind of feedback where you live in a room and you have 500 people sitting there breathing, you get a feedback and you have a different connection with the crowd. So you not feeling your audience when you're virtual obviously means something and has a huge impact on how you create trust as well. And people, obviously the audience, don't feel you the same way either. So it is definitely harder whether you are presenting or negotiating virtually. You have to work harder to try and generate that trust. And I'm, to be quite honest, Boris, I'm more exhausted after a 1 hour virtual session that I am in real life. I can do 2 hours on stage in real life and just feel energized. 2 hours on a Zoom call and I'm exhausted. So it just tells you it's a very different animal than the second you're working virtually.
Yeah, and it seems like we're not used to it.
No.
Yeah, we are not. That's not our natural type of thing. So
no. Many
people, and I read some research like probably 2 weeks ago or something, where I think the person who was talking about it was an Italian. He was a very popular, like his interviews exploded all over the BBC media, like all over the place. And he was saying, he more or less ended the interview that it will take us a lot of time to build stamina. If we are going to be doing this, we really need to spend a lot of time on this till it gets like normal and not that tiring for us.
Sure. I completely agree. Let's
go beyond trust.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously trust is top priority, should be your top priority. Then what? What is important in order for someone who is listening to this presentation to get into a room, speak to one person, negotiate with one person, or present in front of, 500 people and influence that group or that person? Like beyond trust, what do we have?
I would say to interact with the audience, or at least pretend you're interacting with the audience. And when I say pretend, I don't mean, again, you should be fake. You should be quite honest about it. But one of the small things I've been doing, not that I'm right in what I'm doing all the time, but what I've learned works for me is very often almost do small simulations. So when I'm talking about my topic, which obviously typically is negotiation, behavioral economics, or trust, I typically involve the audience by, just reaching out and saying, what's your name? Oh, hi, Boris. How are you doing? Boris, let's assume that you and I are sitting in this meeting and I'll be asking you, it's really a monologue from my side, but I'm involving you. And then the audience automatically feel involved because they might be thinking, oh, shoot, he might be getting to me next, So everybody just get involved. It's a very simple trick that I know all professional keynotes probably use, but it is immediately involving the audience. And I think, again, today, with all the technology we got, there are too many speakers who are not professional, who just deliver their thing, and they have the PowerPoint behind them, and they don't actually need to be there themselves. They could just have been sending a recording, right? Because they're just, spending their 40 minutes delivering what they're supposed to do, and then they go home. But there'd be no involvement. And I think it's so essential for the audience, especially, but for the speaker as well, that you feel there's a connection. And you actually, just even though you've been reaching out to 4 or 5 people out of 500, you still made a connection with the audience that is different than if you just delivered something on stage.
It seems like you have a very interesting opinion about PowerPoint or present, like the visual part of a presentation. Like, what's happening there? We haven't planned for that, but I kind of sense that you are like, I am not all in about those PowerPoints.
Yeah. No. I love graphics. I really do. I just think there's too many people out there who are not qualified to produce a PowerPoint. I think that PowerPoint is the worst thing that ever happened to presentations, because it's like giving a loaded gun to somebody who have no clue on how to use the gun, right? I mean, if they just go crazy on a PowerPoint, it looks terrible and it just disturbs the message. So it's really, really essential to me that if you choose to use PowerPoint, you have put some thoughts into it. And you may have even engaged some professional people helping you creating those PowerPoints, because it's otherwise it's a mess. And I have seen really good content that has been completely destroyed by PowerPoint. I mean, my ambition one day, Boris, is have no text, no words on my PowerPoint whatsoever. Basically doing it the Apple way, where you just have a few pictures and some diagrams and graphics up there. I'm not there yet. I'm working on it because it's not easy, but hopefully one day I'll just be standing up there with a few slides, even though I'm on for a couple of hours, and just showing some great graphics. That's my dream.
All right. If you're chasing the dream, you'll get to it. That's guaranteed, right? And you also have quite some serious involvement in the world of presentations too, right? I mean, you also have one of the books is on more or less presentation skills, right? Mm-hmm. Plus you were involved in like a presentation type of company, which gives you everything that you need to say, hey, I understand and I'm willing. By the way, it would be great. You know what would be great? If you push every one of your customers and everyone around you to listen to exactly what you just said. Like if you hopefully at some point start to push that message, hey, like, guys, this is important. Your whole message can be ruined just because of your presentation and how it looks. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't even count, Boris, how many times I've been looking at somebody's bad presentation and thinking it's just destroying everything. And I'm actually terrible at sitting through presentations because I sometimes forget the content because I'm too obsessed about how they actually deliver it. So, if they deliver it in a really bad way or the presentation, the PowerPoint slide is really bad, then I get all confused about the content as well. So I might be that very critical audience that is just looking at the whole thing and thinking it's not compatible. Things are not working out right now. So,
Yeah. And the problem is global. I mean, it's not just in the US or...
Oh, no. No. It's everywhere.
Yeah. How great. Like how cool it is to have such an interesting problem all across the world. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I feel like you're saying, hey, we always, even on our website, say, hey, because even today we were talking with a very large customer. I cannot name the customer for many, many reasons, but they were saying, hey, we want somebody to help us out with the presentations and make them look beautiful. And we were like, sure, but what about how they're going to be delivered and what's actually being delivered, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the story, the design, and the delivery, all of those three components that play vital part in making sure that the whole presentation becomes successful. And you mentioned them, not the story, but you said content, then the design and the delivery. I feel like you also have that same opinion that if one of them fails, you have a problem. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And I completely agree with you, by the way, about the story. I truly believe that the keynote speakers, not only in the future, but today as well, that are able to deliver a solid story are more successful in delivering their message. So, yeah, I agree with you. Storytelling as well is essential.
All right. So now let's move to the delivery part. Let's jump. We know that the story is important. We know trust is important. We know story is important. We know design can ruin your whole talk. Let's move on to the delivery for a second, because I recently saw something that you published that was something like a one-pager, and a lot of the things that were in that one-pager were connected and related to body language and nonverbal communication. How big is nonverbal, how important is body language in the world of communication in general?
I'm sure you know the study from UCLA that is actually old now, claiming that 93% of the reason that you listen to somebody, you trust somebody, or you want to work with somebody is based on their nonverbal language. So that means either their body language or their tone of voice, and only 7% is based on the word. I know that a lot of people out there are saying that can't be the case, but I truly believe in it. Now, whether the number is 93 or 7, or it's 10 or 90 or 80 or 20, doesn't matter. But I do believe that the nonverbal language carries a huge part of the reason that people trust you and want to listen to you. It's a little bit, I usually use the comparison, Boris, that when you listen to a new song for the first time, what is it you remember the first? Is it the lyrics or is it the melody? It is always the melody, right? And the melody in a new song is the same as your nonverbal language. That is the first thing you remember about a person. So when we're talking about that, we get that gut sensation, we got a stomach sensation about a person. It's not really a stomach sensation. It's our mind that has been reading, subconsciously has been reading the nonverbal behavior of that person we are sitting with. And that is giving us a message saying that we dislike, we don't trust, there's something wrong. And that means if the body language is incompatible with the wording, then we have a lack of communication, and that will cost you on trust. So your nonverbal communication is so essential, and that goes from everything from your facial expression to your posture, to your use of gestures, to how you move. And we actually spend time on that in negotiation as well. So a lot of our clients are very surprised when we start talking about body language, how we're going to perform our body language in the meeting, because it is really essential that we think about it, If I'm leaning back and sitting like this and having a non-smiling attitude throughout the meeting, that's certainly going to be read differently than if I'm sitting like this, right? And having an open facial expression and using gestures and leaning back and forth and doing stuff. So it is way more important than most people are thinking about. And I know a lot of people are coming to me as well, Boris, and say, well, we can't remember everything. We can't remember the content of what we're saying and the PowerPoint and the nonverbal thing. And it is just too much. And obviously it is, but we have to prioritize. And then in certain periods, focus on the body language. In certain periods, focus on the content. In certain periods, focusing on reading the counterpart. So we adjust it and get everything in balance. So I can't emphasize enough how important the nonverbal language is as well.
So how do you, when you say prioritize different things in different moments, do you mean in one and the same meeting, or is it as part of the learning process? Hey, first learn the content. What do you mean when you say prioritize different things during different?
Yeah, exactly. No, I actually meant it throughout the same meeting, because it is really, as a human being, we have a limitation on how much we can think of about at the same time, right? So in a meeting, we are able to think about a few things at the same time. So we have to prioritize. So right now, for instance, if I'm standing up during the meeting to present something on the screen, I am focused on my body language right now. I may not be focused on reading the counterpart. When I'm sitting down asking the counterpart a question, I'm giving them the opportunity to talk. And while they're talking, I can actually read their body language and combine that with what they're saying to identify whether I like or trust or agree or disagree with what they're saying. So that's what I mean by prioritizing. So, I know for these 5 minutes, I have to focus on this. And the next 5 minutes, I'll be focusing on something else. That's how we should do it, because being focused on everything throughout a 1 hour meeting is basically impossible.
Yeah. How hard is it because I think that many people ask, hey, how can I scan and understand the audience, right? That is like, how can I scan the audience? And I always hear that question, surprisingly, or not surprisingly for that matter, from people that are not even willing to rehearse their presentation. Like, is it possible to not even know your presentation, but still be able to convey your message successfully, sync with your slides as it's seamless, yet scan the whole audience and understand what's happening in the room, adapt based on it? What's our take here?
Yeah, no, that's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I think I'm doing like a lot of presenters are doing. I am obviously rehearsing my presentation. I'm obviously always doing it, at least mentally and sometimes even physically. And when I'm preparing my presentation, I'm also preparing my presentation with the audience I'm going to talk to. So I'm actually imagining the audience sitting there. I know where they're sitting. I know how they're behaving. I know how they're looking. And, that sometimes becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because if I'm seeing my audience being happy and satisfied and engaged and all of that, that is usually what I'm getting as well. And then I'm focusing obviously on the reaction. Back to what we just talked about, Boris, when you're doing a virtual thing, you can't see your audience. You have no idea. You're telling a joke and you don't know whether people are laughing or not. You don't have any reaction coming back to you. So in a real live situation, obviously, you're reading your audience both consciously and subconsciously all the time. So you can see whether people are engaged or lacking engagement, they're smiling or not smiling, or nodding their head or not smiling, nodding. So obviously, that's just to add another tool to the toolbox that you need to be aware of as a presenter. You need to focus on that, obviously. How is the audience reacting to your message?
So I always thought that if you're about to be scanning for the audience, if you're about to try and understand what the audience is thinking, you have to have your mind free, right? I mean, you have to be right there in that moment, not thinking about anything else but that one, right? Because otherwise you're trying to multitask in a very bad way.
Yes.
And at least I am not capable of doing it. If I'm trying to figure out what is the next thing that I have to say, and yet at the same time I'm trying to understand what are the people on the first row thinking, haven't been successful in that one. I don't know if somebody who is listening to this one managed to do it. Please shoot us an email, Boris at 350. Anyway, so how I was about to ask, what are you mentioned some of the things that people should probably be monitoring for, but if you are on stage or if you're in the boardroom, what are those nonverbal cues that the presenter or the keynote speaker is not a bad idea for them to monitor for? Like, what are your top threes, let's say?
Well, I would say my top three, if we're talking about the Western world, because it varies a little bit from culture to culture, but eye contact is obviously essential. If you're sitting with an audience where you've lost eye contact with a huge amount of people at the same time, that might be a warning signal that something is wrong. Now, you always have people that will be looking down or taking notes or looking out the window or whatever. That shouldn't disturb you really, but eye contact in general is really essential for your success as a speaker. I would also say the involvement in general. I mean, and that's back to the facial expression. I'm one of the speakers that like to implement humor. I think humor is a great way of conveying a message. I think it's a great way of making people remember what you're saying. I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but I'm one of those that like to build in stories that is funny. So to me, obviously, getting a reaction through people smiling and laughing is kind of essential as well. You know, could you imagine, Boris? There's nothing worse than standing in front of 300 people telling a joke and nobody's laughing. I mean, that's like a tough situation, isn't it? By the way, let me just add, I have the deepest respect for a stand-up comedian, a professional stand-up comedian that can be on stage for 1.5 hours and make people laugh. That is genius. I mean, I couldn't do that, but they are so good at it. So we can actually learn a lot about communication skills from looking at really skilled stand-up comedians. They are so good at it. And then I would say another way you can read your audience is obviously engagement in general. I mean, just look at people. Are they actually sitting up? Are they seeming engaged? If you open up for questions, how do you see that involvement? And I have to bring a warning though, and that is that question is very dependent on culture. In some cultures, people are asking crazy questions like crazy. In other cultures, they are absolutely silent. And that does mean in some cultures that you've been a failure, even though they're quiet. It's not just in their nature to ask a lot of questions. So yeah, that's really it.
That was super interesting. There was like, which are the cultures that are super into questions and which are ones that you can expect to be a little bit more closed? What have you seen there?
Oh, yeah. If you take where I'm right now, Americans love to be engaged. I mean, they ask questions like you wouldn't believe it in general. I'm generalizing right now because there's obviously a difference within the culture. So North Americans in general. If I move into Europe, you have different cultures. Obviously, Europe is a combination of cultures. But if you go to an extreme like Finland is introverts. They usually don't say a lot. And when they do say something, you have to listen because they're very serious about it. So that will be more quiet, and Scandinavia is a little bit more quiet as well. And then as you go along and go deeper south into Europe, that might be more engagement. And if you go to Asia, that is more quiet as well. There's a tendency in Asia, again, I'm generalizing, that you respect the authority and you don't question the authority. So if you're the authority on stage in Asia and you say something, you will typically not be questioned about it because they will accept the message and just don't ask questions. So when I'm teaching at universities in the US, we have a very cross-cultural crowd with a lot of Asians and a lot of Europeans and a lot of North Americans in the room. It's a small UN right there. And it's always the same. Stereotypes works. I mean, the Asians are quiet, don't ask questions during class. They might ask questions after class, but not during class. And the North Americans are very loud and ask a lot of questions, and the Europeans are right there in between somewhere. So yeah, that's the broad picture.
That yet again, I think shows you and shows everyone how important it is to have a very clear picture of who is in front of you.
Oh, very, very much so. Yeah. No, I learned this the hard way, Boris. I've been standing in front of audiences. There was no reaction. I was thinking, this is terrible. And then I later on learned that that's just the culture. They're just quiet.
Yeah. What are the, like, when you deliver keynotes and trainings and speech, like all over the world, like, how do you approach understanding the audience? Are you asking the organizers if it's an event? Do you do some other research? Like, what is in your arsenal of tools in order for you to understand better who's going to be in front of me?
Well, I learned it this way. I've published 4 books in China, and I've been going to China quite a lot to do book launches. And I'm always doing the following, boys. When I'm launching a book in a country, I'm always asking the audience after the presentation, why did you choose to buy and read one of my books? And you could imagine that I get a lot of different answers around the world. But in China, I'm always getting the same answer, regardless how many people I'm asking. And the answer I'm getting in China to my question, why did you choose to buy and read my book, is always the same. I bought and read your book because I want to know how the enemy is thinking. You know, always the same answer in China, regardless how many people I'm asking. And that made me think, what is it in China that specifically make all of them give me that answer. And I don't get that answer in Europe. I don't get that answer in North America. I don't get that answer anywhere but China. And the reason for that, I don't know if any of you listening to this have been studying old Chinese war philosophy, but in the Chinese mentality, you should never ever plan your strategy, your tactics, or your target before knowing the one of your enemy. And that is such an important lesson for us in the West, because we have a tendency to step into a meeting or conference or presentation or negotiation being completely unprepared, because we just think we can wing it. We just talk a lot. And that's another thing. We have a tendency, Boris, to talk too much in the West compared to Asia. And what the Chinese are very good at is listening. They're just being quiet, and they have been studying their enemy, the counterpart, before they actually get into it. So the reason that a lot of Chinese are buying Western management books, not only mine, but other books as well, is not predominantly to learn from the book, but actually to study the counterpart. Because if I have studied the book coming from the West, I know what you've been reading. I know what you've been studying. I know the way you think, and then I can behave accordingly. So back to your question, we really need to understand the counterpart, and culture is an interesting aspect, because culture is not just going to a country. I know Bulgaria, you just don't have one culture, right? There's one culture by the coast. There may be a different culture in Sofia, and there may be a third culture somewhere else, right? So culture is really, really complicated, because you need to understand what audience that you're working with. So for instance, if I'm going to a Muslim country, I am changing some of my slides. There may be some slides that could be offensive to that audience. So I'm changing that. If I'm going to a different culture, they have a different value set, I may change some of it and change some of my stories as well. So the way I'm doing it, well, I've been doing it for so many years now. So now I just know automatically. But before that, there's some great things you can just look up. I mean, Google it. What are the specifics for in Malaysia? Is there anything I should be aware of going to Australia? Buy some books on cultures. There's lots and lots of them out there that really just describes, again, it's generalizing, but describing in general what you should do. So
yeah, I think that is that one, the last part, where not only search on the web, but I think that one of those books, and just having one of those books that more or less presents you and gives you some insights in regards to culture, you shouldn't read that. I think that, or at least that's what we are talking about. I use that. I have this Kiss, Bow, and Shake. It's the name of the book. I use that as just as a dictionary, okay, today we're speaking with the French guys.
Yeah.
Let me go there and double check some things and understand the specifics. Yeah, right. That book is that type of knowledge is, gives you a competitive edge every single time,
I agree, Boris. And the great thing today, it's not even hard getting that information, right? I mean, you can basically just Google how to negotiate with the French, and boom, there you go. Then you just have to filter whether the information is correct or not, but it will give you some kind of information how to deal with stuff. So
yeah. Anything else that you are doing to prepare, or anything else that you have as a step-by-step process, or something that you follow, or something that is very important for you when you're about to go on stage or getting ready for a super important keynote presentation? What are you doing to prepare for those keynotes? Because as I can imagine, and I believe everyone can imagine, that when you're getting invited and paid to speak and deliver a keynote, people expect a lot, right? So the stakes are high, and you as the speaker have to deliver on that level. So what's happening behind the scenes? Obviously, you said that you're rehearsing the presentation. You adapt it based on the culture, based on the audience. Anything else that's going on behind the scenes?
Well, one thing I'm doing is that I am constantly developing my content. And that is not really for the audience, because they wouldn't know that it has been developed or changed since last year. I'm doing it for my own sake, because back to what you said earlier, if you cannot concentrate on the audience, you can't deliver the best possible version of you. And if I'm listening to myself and listening to my own words and feel that I sound like a record, I'm just repeating myself, then I'm basically losing myself, because I'm getting bored in my own delivery. So I have to refresh and renew and improve my presentations all the time to be on top of my game. So as I said, it's not really for the audience, because I have a new audience all the time. So they don't know. I mean, I could in theory deliver the same presentation I did 5 years ago. They would know, but it doesn't work for me. So that's one thing, Boris, that is actually a challenge for me, that I have to renew my own stuff all the time. It's also improving it, hopefully. So that's a good process. Another thing that really works for me, I'm always having music in the room before I go on stage. And I always had audience saying to me, that's so nice that you're playing music for the audience, but that's not true. I'm not playing it for the audience. I'm playing it for me because it's energizing me. So I'm using music a lot. I use music in the breaks as well. If there's breaks in a session, and it's just energizing. So picking the right music for you and what you feel like in the moment is really energizing. And then the last thing I want to add as well is that goes without saying, the opening is really essential. If I get the right essential energized opening where I just feel I hit it, it just takes off. You know, you can lose or win the audience in 20, 30 seconds. So that's where it's happening. So I would say these three things work for me. May not work for somebody else, but that works for me.
But don't you like when you see a presenter, when you said that the beginning, the opening is super important, how many presentations have you seen out there which end with the speaker going, well, I think, that's it for today. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Yeah, that is true. That is unfortunately happening a lot.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things when I see it, even from experienced speakers. I'm like, oh my God, really, really. Yeah. So I would add that also please, everyone who is listening, please also, there are ways to have an incredibly powerful end, and the end of your presentation is super important.
Yeah. I'm actually, if I could share another bit, I've been working on for years trying to circle it correctly. So you're opening with a story or some facts, and you're closing with that as well. I admire speakers who are just capable of doing that. Opening, grabbing something in the beginning, and then 45 minutes later, they close with that thing again and just connect the two dots. I'm blown away when I see that work. It's just remarkable.
It's a piece of art, you know?
Yeah, it is.
It's a piece of art. So, Keld, who is the next person that we should have on this podcast? What do you think? Did someone recently made an impression on you in this virtual world? Is there someone that you admire tremendously? Obviously, like Mark Bowden, who was already part of the podcast, but we need to get him again. So, Mark, if you're listening to this one, get ready for it. So, is there anyone else? Is there anyone else who may be connected to the presentation industry? Right? Yeah. In one way or the other, that you think it would be great for everyone who is listening to this one to kind of meet in this audio?
There's a professor on negotiation from Harvard University, Dr. Daniel Shapiro. He is not only a capacity within the field of negotiation, but he's a great presenter as well. He can deliver stories that will blow you away. So some people might perceive negotiation as a kind of a boring topic, but just invite him into the room and you'll get excited. Whether you're into negotiation or not, you'll get excited. He's like a Disney World, the way he delivers a message. So Daniel Shapiro from Harvard would be one. Mark, as you just pointed out, would be another one. Within the world of body language, he's a guru. I love everything he's doing. I love his personality. He's very good at it. And then in a completely different area, more socioeconomic, there's a company owner by the name of Dan Price from Seattle in Washington State, the US. If you go to LinkedIn and look him up, you'll see him. He's a great presenter as well. And the way he tells stories is really great as well. He's not a professional presenter, but he could be. He's just very good at it. So
what is his name again?
Dan Price.
All right.
Dan Price, yeah.
I have both of them. Mark, you were excluded from that list because I know your name, obviously. So perfect. I will try to get to Daniel first. I can already feel that won't be that easy, but you confirm, you're like, it won't be that easy. So I'll at least try and see how it goes. Where can people find more about what you're doing, or what is the best place for them to connect?
Well, my own website, keldjensen.com, is an easy one. People are very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And that's really it. They can see a lot of my books on Amazon and local bookstores as well. So I think that's the way to find what I'm doing. And then obviously, if they go to YouTube and just Google my name, there's a bunch of videos on what I'm doing and the content and whatsoever. So if you do have an interest in negotiation, trust, communication, or behavioral economics, that's the place to go.
I will make sure that we also link the YouTube, writing that down. So thanks so much for stopping by for this 1 hour. It was
a delight. Thank you.
That was super nice. I just felt this energy, right? From when you're a professional speaker and when you're doing that professionally, you can just feel that things are different, right? Thanks so much for joining. And again, I'll make sure that I'll link absolutely everything in the show notes so that people can find your website, the books, the channel, and connect on LinkedIn. Keld, thanks again for joining. That was that was incredible.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, everyone, you heard it. I don't know what to say. I think that we have to plan for another episode in probably, let's say, 6-12 months. We'll see how that goes. Keld is a very busy person. So in the meantime, you can also check our website, 356labs.com, see what we are doing and how we can help you and your company write, design, and deliver what we call truly effective presentations. And do not forget, Present to Succeed, our conference, the biggest presentation skills event in the world. If you don't know about it, go check it out. Thanks for listening. And in case you found this episode useful, subscribe to the podcast, Keld. Subscribe to the podcast. And why not even leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks again and see you in the next one.